The Middle East has always been a region where history moves fast, but sometimes it moves toward the edge of something far more dangerous. Tonight, fighter jets are in the air, missiles are on standby, diplomats are rushing into emergency meetings, oil markets are trembling, and two nations with a long, bitter history, the United States and Iran, stand closer to open confrontation than they have in years. This is not just another headline. This is the story of how decades of mistrust, sanctions, nuclear fears, regional conflicts, and power politics have brought two governments to a moment that could reshape global stability. To understand what is happening now, we must go back, not months, not years, but decades. Because this tension did not begin with one strike, one speech, or one military maneuver. It began in 1979. When the Iranian Revolution overthrew the US-backed Shah, everything changed. American diplomats were taken hostage in Tehran, trust collapsed, diplomatic ties were severed. Since then, relations between Washington and Tehran have been defined by suspicion, sanctions, proxy conflicts, covert operations, nuclear negotiations, and constant warnings of escalation. Over time, Iran expanded its regional influence, supporting allied groups across the Middle East, increasing its missile capabilities, and advancing its nuclear program. The United States, meanwhile, tightened economic sanctions, strengthened military alliances in the region, and increased its naval presence in the Persian Gulf. For years, both sides operated in a shadow war, cyber attacks, targeted strikes, intelligence operations, always stopping just short of full-scale conflict. But recently, the temperature has risen. Military actions have been exchanged, statements have grown sharper, international leaders are calling for restraint. Oil prices have fluctuated sharply, global markets react to every new development. Analysts debate whether this is controlled escalation or the beginning of something much larger. The core issue remains Iran's nuclear ambitions. Tehran insists its program is for peaceful energy purposes. Washington and its allies argue the enrichment levels and transparency concerns suggest otherwise. Negotiations have repeatedly stalled, trust has repeatedly broken, and each breakdown leaves less room for diplomacy. At the same time, the broader Middle East landscape is fragile. Israel watches closely. Gulf states calculate risk. Russia and China observe strategically. European leaders push for de-escalation. This is no longer just a bilateral dispute, it is a global strategic equation. The question now is not simply who fired first or who responded. The real question is, how far are both sides willing to go? Modern warfare between two heavily armed states would not look like traditional battles. It would involve cyber operations, missile strikes, naval clashes, drone warfare, regional proxy conflicts. And the consequences would ripple far beyond borders. Oil supply routes could be disrupted, global shipping lanes threatened, energy prices surge, financial markets destabilized. For ordinary people thousands of miles away, it could mean higher fuel prices, economic uncertainty, and geopolitical instability. For the Middle East, it could mean another chapter of destruction. But war is not inevitable. History shows that even at the brink, diplomacy can pull nations back. Back-channel talks, mediated negotiations, strategic pauses, international pressure. The coming weeks will determine whether this crisis becomes a defining global conflict or another chapter in a long pattern of brinkmanship. One thing is certain, the world is watching, and the balance between power and restraint has never felt more fragile.
For decades, the relationship between the United States and Iran has moved like a slow-burning fuse, sometimes quiet, sometimes sparking, but never fully extinguished. To understand how the present moment became so volatile, we must examine the layers beneath the surface. Because geopolitics is rarely about one event. It is about memory, it is about power, it is about perception, and in this case, it is about history that neither side has forgotten. The shadow of 1979. When the Iranian Revolution erupted in 1979, it was more than a political shift. It was an ideological earthquake. The Shah, long supported by Washington, was seen by many Iranians as a symbol of foreign interference and authoritarian control. When he fell, The new leadership defined itself partly in opposition to American influence. The hostage crisis that followed, where U.S. diplomats were held for 444 days, cemented a narrative in Washington that Iran was hostile and unpredictable. In Tehran, another narrative formed, that America had manipulated Iran's political destiny for decades. These two narratives have shaped policy ever since. Sanctions became the primary American tool. Isolation became Iran's defensive posture, and mistrust became permanent. The long, cold conflict. Unlike conventional wars, the U.S.-Iran rivalry has often played out indirectly. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, tensions simmered. Naval encounters in the Persian Gulf, accusations of terrorism sponsorship, economic restrictions. But the real turning point came in the early 2000s. After the September 11 attacks, the United States dramatically expanded its military presence in the Middle East, Afghanistan to the east of Iran, Iraq to the west. Suddenly, American forces were on both sides of Iranian borders. For Tehran, this was not coincidence. It was encirclement. For Washington, it was counterterrorism strategy. Two different interpretations of the same reality. And that gap widened further as Iran expanded its regional alliances in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and beyond. Each side accused the other of destabilizing the region. Each side saw itself as responding defensively. The nuclear question. At the center of modern tension lies one issue that refuses to disappear: uranium enrichment. Iran insists its nuclear program is for civilian energy and scientific development. The United States and several allies argue that enrichment levels and restricted inspections create suspicion of weapons capability. Diplomatic efforts have risen and collapsed in cycles. Agreements signed, agreements withdrawn. Sanctions imposed, sanctions lifted, then imposed again. Each cycle leaves deeper scars. Each collapse strengthens hardliners on both sides. The nuclear file is not just technical, it is psychological. It represents trust, and trust has been in short supply. The regional chessboard. Meanwhile, the broader Middle East has become a complex chessboard. Conflicts in Syria, Yemen, Iraq, and Lebanon have drawn in regional and global powers. Iran supports allied groups across multiple countries. The United States strengthens military partnerships and defense agreements with regional states. Missile defense systems are deployed. Naval fleets patrol strategic waterways. The Strait of Hormuz, a narrow passage through which a significant percentage of global oil passes, becomes a focal point of tension. A single miscalculation there could ripple across the global economy within hours. Energy markets react instantly to any escalation. Insurance costs for shipping spike. Stock markets fluctuate. The world economy, tightly connected, becomes sensitive to every development. The modern battlefield. If confrontation escalates, it would not resemble wars of the past. It would be multidimensional. Cyber warfare targeting infrastructure, drone strikes launched from hundreds of miles away, precision missiles capable of striking strategic facilities, naval confrontations in narrow sea lanes, information warfare spreading narratives across social media in real time. Modern conflict is as digital as it is physical, and that complexity increases risk. Because when so many tools are available, the threshold for action lowers. Political pressure at home. Both governments face domestic pressures. In the United States, foreign policy decisions are shaped by elections, public opinion, congressional debate, and alliance commitments. In Iran, leadership must balance internal economic strain, public expectations, and regional strategy. Sanctions have significantly impacted Iran's economy over the years. Inflation, currency pressure, youth unemployment. Meanwhile, American policymakers face pressure to prevent nuclear proliferation while avoiding another prolonged Middle Eastern war. Neither side wants uncontrolled escalation, but neither side wants to appear weak. That balance is delicate. The role of global powers. No conflict today exists in isolation. Russia observes carefully. China calculates energy security implications. European governments push for diplomatic restraint. The United Nations holds emergency consultations. Global leaders understand that a direct military clash between the US and Iran would not stay contained. It would reshape alliances. It could redraw strategic balances. And it could accelerate shifts in global power structures. The psychology of deterrence. Much of the tension operates under a doctrine called deterrence. Each side signals strength to prevent the other from acting. Military exercises, strategic deployments, public warnings. But deterrence carries a paradox. It prevents war until it fails. History shows that wars often begin not because one side wants total destruction, but because miscalculation spirals beyond control. A radar misread, a missile misidentified, a retaliation that goes one step further than expected. Escalation rarely announces itself clearly. It unfolds. The human dimension. Behind strategic maps and political statements are ordinary people. Families in Tehran, families in Washington, families across the region.
When analysts speak of escalation, they often mean geopolitical consequences. But for civilians, escalation means uncertainty, economic instability, fear, questions about safety and future. History teaches that geopolitical tension affects not only governments, but generations. The fragile moment. So where does the situation stand now? At a fragile equilibrium. Military capabilities are visible. Diplomatic channels remain open, though strained. Global attention is intense. The next moves will matter. A statement can calm markets. A strike can ignite them. A diplomatic breakthrough can reset trajectory. A miscalculation can accelerate confrontation. This is a moment defined not by inevitability, but by choice. And that is where we stand. On a line between deterrence and escalation. Between negotiation and confrontation. Between history repeating itself and history taking a different path. The world has seen brinkmanship before. The difference now is speed. Information spreads instantly. Military responses deploy rapidly. Public reaction forms in real time. The margin for error has never been thinner.
In human history, global naval dominance, stealth aircraft, carrier strike groups, cyber capabilities, space surveillance systems. Its defense budget exceeds that of many nations combined. Iran, by contrast, does not match the United States in conventional military scale. But power is not measured only in size. Iran's strategy is asymmetrical. Missile systems designed for regional deterrence, drone fleets capable of precision strikes, naval units specialized in fast, agile operations in narrow waterways, alliances with non-state actors across multiple countries. Where the United States projects power globally, Iran focuses regionally. That difference shapes every calculation. The strait that could change the world. There is one narrow passage that analysts watch more than any other, the Strait of Hormuz, a slim corridor between Iran and the Arabian Peninsula, a critical artery of global oil supply. If that waterway were disrupted, even temporarily, global energy prices would spike within hours. Shipping insurance costs would surge, stock markets would react violently, inflation in distant countries could rise almost overnight. In modern geopolitics, a few nautical miles can carry global consequences. This is why naval movements in that region are monitored constantly. This is why even small incidents draw global headlines, because the strait is not just water, it is leverage. Sanctions, the silent weapon. While missiles and jets dominate headlines, economic warfare has been one of the most powerful tools in this rivalry. Sanctions are designed to pressure governments without firing a shot. Over the years, sanctions targeting Iran have focused on oil exports, banking systems, and access to global financial networks. The impact has been significant. Currency fluctuations, reduced foreign investment, limited access to international markets. But sanctions also have unintended effects. They can strengthen hardline positions. They can shift economic partnerships towards other global powers. They can reshape alliances in unexpected ways. Economic pressure is powerful, but it does not always produce political surrender. Sometimes it produces adaptation. The nuclear timeline. The nuclear question is not a single event. It is a timeline stretching over decades. Early nuclear research programs, international agreements, inspection regimes, breakdowns in trust. When diplomatic agreements were reached, they offered temporary stability. When agreements collapsed, uncertainty returned, stronger than before. Each negotiation cycle carried hope. Each breakdown carried consequences. The issue is not only uranium enrichment percentages. It is about strategic positioning. If one side believes the other is moving closer to weapons capability, the pressure to act increases. And when pressure increases, restraint becomes harder. The cyber dimension. Modern conflict extends beyond land and sea. Cyber operations have become a central battlefield. Infrastructure grids, financial systems, communication networks, power plants, hospitals. A sophisticated cyber strike can disrupt daily life without a single soldier crossing a border. It can cause confusion, fear, and economic instability. And it can be difficult to attribute clearly, creating gray zones of responsibility. In a US-Iran escalation scenario, cyber operations would likely play a major role. Silent, fast, and potentially devastating. The risk of miscalculation. History shows that major wars often begin not with intention, but with miscalculation. A radar misinterpretation, an accidental strike, a retaliatory move that goes one step too far. Intense environments, reaction times shorten. Leaders must decide quickly. Information can be incomplete. And once momentum builds, reversing it becomes harder. That is why analysts focus not only on capability, but on communication. Are diplomatic channels open?
Are military de-escalation mechanisms functioning? Are there back-channel conversations? Because in moments like this, communication can prevent catastrophe. Domestic realities. Every foreign policy decision carries domestic consequences. In the United States, public opinion towards Middle Eastern conflict has shifted over the years. After long wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, there is caution. There is debate. There is scrutiny. In Iran, economic pressure and regional strategy influence leadership decisions. National pride, security concerns, internal political balance. Governments must calculate both external threats and internal stability. Escalation abroad can strengthen unity or deepen internal strain. Each leadership must weigh these factors carefully. Global energy shock scenario. Imagine a scenario where tensions escalate sharply. Missile strikes target infrastructure. Shipping slows in strategic waterways. Oil supply drops. Energy prices surge globally. In interconnected economies, fuel prices influence everything. Transportation, food supply chains, manufacturing costs, air travel. Within weeks, global inflation could spike. Stock markets could fluctuate sharply. Governments worldwide would face economic pressure. This is why even limited regional conflict has global economic weight. The diplomatic window. Despite rising tension, diplomacy often operates quietly. Public rhetoric may sound aggressive. Behind closed doors, conversations may continue. Third-party mediators, regional intermediaries, back-channel envoys. History has shown that even adversaries can negotiate under the right conditions. The question is timing. Will diplomacy act before escalation reaches a point of no return? Or will events outpace negotiation? The human cost of escalation. Strategists speak in terms of deterrence and capability. But conflict always has a human cost. Infrastructure damage, civilian displacement, economic hardship, psychological stress. In an age of instant media, images of destruction travel instantly. Public opinion can shift rapidly. International pressure can intensify quickly. Modern conflict is not fought in silence. It unfolds under global observation. The geopolitical ripple effect. A serious escalation between the United States and Iran would not remain isolated. Regional alliances would activate. Neighboring states would adjust military readiness. Global powers would reassess strategic positions. Energy importing nations would calculate economic impact. International organizations would convene emergency sessions. The ripple would extend across continents. Because this is not simply a bilateral dispute. It is a node in the global system. The question that remains. So the world watches. Not because war is certain, but because possibility exists. Because history shows that tensions can cool or ignite. Because restraint and escalation exist side by side in moments like this. The coming decisions will matter. Statements will matter. Movements will matter. The difference between crisis and catastrophe often lies in timing and judgment. And now the central question emerges. Will this chapter become another episode in a long history of managed tension? Or will it become a defining conflict of the 21st century? The answer has not yet been written, but the stakes are unmistakably high.
Memory of past humiliations. Memory of past victories. For the United States, the memory of prolonged Middle Eastern wars remains vivid. The financial cost, the human toll, the political division, all of it shapes modern decision-making. For Iran, memory stretches further back. Foreign intervention, regional isolation, economic pressure, survival against larger powers. History is not just background, it is fuel. And in geopolitics, fuel can either power restraint or ignite escalation. The information battlefield. In today's world, conflict does not begin only with missiles. It begins with narratives, statements, headlines, images, social media waves. Information moves faster than aircraft. Public perception can shift within hours. Markets respond instantly. Political pressure builds rapidly. Both sides understand this. Carefully worded speeches, strategic leaks, visible military drills. These are signals. They are designed to influence not just the opponent, but global audiences. Modern conflict is psychological as much as physical. The battle for interpretation often begins before any physical confrontation. Military posturing and strategic signaling. When tensions rise, militaries adjust posture. Naval groups reposition. Aircraft patrol patterns shift. Missile defense systems activate. Intelligence surveillance intensifies. Each move is calculated. Some are defensive. Some are deterrent. Some are messages. In high-tension scenarios, posture itself becomes communication. A carrier group entering a region is not just movement, it is a statement. A missile test is not just a demonstration, it is a signal. Strategic signaling aims to prevent war, but if misread, it can accelerate it. Economic interdependence and vulnerability. The modern global system is interconnected in ways history has never seen. Energy markets, trade routes, digital finance, supply chains. A disruption in one region can impact continents within days. If conflict were to interrupt key oil flows, energy importing nations would feel pressure immediately. Inflation, transportation costs, manufacturing slowdowns. Global economies remain sensitive to geopolitical shocks. This interconnectedness creates both risk and restraint. Risk, because consequences spread rapidly. Restraint, because both sides understand the economic cost of prolonged instability. Proxy dynamics. One of the most complex elements of U.S.-Iran tension is the network of regional actors, alliances, partnerships, strategic relationships. When major powers compete indirectly, smaller arenas become flashpoints. Local conflicts can escalate quickly if external support deepens. The danger of proxy dynamics is predictability. An incident in one location can trigger responses elsewhere, and the chain reaction can become difficult to contain. Escalation ladder. Security analysts often speak of an escalation ladder. At the lowest rung, rhetoric, sanctions, diplomatic protests. Higher, limited strikes, cyber operations, regional military engagement. Higher still, direct military confrontation. The goal of deterrence is to remain below the highest rungs. The challenge is knowing when a step upward has occurred, because escalation rarely announces itself clearly. It happens incrementally, and by the time leaders realize how high they've climbed, stepping down becomes harder. The nuclear red line. Nuclear capability changes strategic calculations dramatically. Even the perception of nearing weapons capability can trigger preemptive thinking. This is why nuclear diplomacy remains central. Verification mechanisms, inspection regimes, confidence-building measures. Without transparency, suspicion grows, and suspicion increases the risk of preventive action. In high-stakes scenarios, perception can carry as much weight as reality. The role of allies. No modern power acts alone. Allies influence decisions, defense agreements, regional partnerships, strategic cooperation. In times of crisis, consultation increases. Emergency meetings, security briefings, joint statements. Allies can act as stabilizers, encouraging restraint, or they can intensify pressure, urging firmness. Diplomacy does not occur in a vacuum. It is shaped by networks of commitment, public sentiment. Modern leaders must consider public reaction. In democratic societies, public opinion shapes public debates. In other political systems, public mood still influences stability and legitimacy. Media coverage amplifies emotion. Images of conflict can rally support or trigger opposition. Public fatigue with conflict can restrain escalation. Public outrage can accelerate it. In today's hyper-connected world, domestic reaction is immediate and powerful. The technology factor. Military technology has advanced dramatically. Precision-guided systems, autonomous drones, satellite tracking, artificial intelligence-enhanced defense. This technology reduces uncertainty in some areas, but introduces new complexities in others. Autonomous systems operate at speeds faster than human deliberation. Cyber tools can disrupt critical infrastructure in seconds. The faster conflict tools move, the smaller the window for human correction. Speed increases risk. The energy weapon. Energy is not just an economic commodity. It is geopolitical leverage. Countries dependent on imported energy calculate risk differently from those that produce it. If energy supply becomes unstable, diplomatic pressure for de-escalation intensifies. If supply remains secure, strategic patience may increase. Energy shapes strategy more than headlines reveal. Strategic patience versus strategic pressure. Throughout history, some conflicts have been managed through patience. Wait. Signal. Negotiate. Pause. Others have been driven by pressure. Act quickly. Demonstrate strength. Control narrative. In this moment, both patience and pressure exist simultaneously. Leaders must decide which path dominates. Too much patience can appear weak. Too much pressure can ignite escalation. Balance is delicate. The psychological threshold. Every conflict has a psychological threshold. The point where leaders believe they must act. Sometimes it is triggered by a specific event. Sometimes it builds gradually. The danger lies in cumulative escalation. Small incidents. Small responses. Gradually intensifying. Until suddenly, the threshold is crossed. And events move faster than diplomacy. Global observation. Unlike past centuries, conflict today unfolds under constant surveillance. Satellites track movement. Analysts dissect statements in real time. Markets respond instantly. Social media amplifies narratives. There is no secrecy in large-scale movement. This transparency can deter aggression, but it can also create pressure to respond publicly. Silence may be interpreted as weakness. Response may be interpreted as escalation. The spotlight changes strategy. The decision point. The current moment is not defined by certainty. It is defined by possibility. Possibility of miscalculation. Possibility of restraint. Possibility of negotiation. Possibility of escalation. History shows that brinkmanship can resolve peacefully. History also shows that brinkmanship can spiral. The difference lies in judgment, communication, timing, clarity of intent. The world stands in observation. Energy markets monitor signals. Diplomats maintain channels. Military planners assess contingencies. This is not yet a chapter of declared war. It is a chapter of tension. But tension, if unmanaged, can become something far larger. And so the question remains, will this confrontation become a turning point toward broader instability? Or will it become another example of crisis contained? The answer will not come from one speech, one strike, or one headline. It will emerge from a sequence of decisions
It is about power
made under pressure,
structures,
under scrutiny,
influence zones,
and under the weight of history.
energy corridors, military positioning, and the long arc of global dominance. The United States remains one of the most powerful military and economic forces in the world. Its alliances stretch across Europe, East Asia, and the Middle East. Its naval presence spans oceans. Its currency dominates global trade. Iran, meanwhile, operates differently. It does not project global dominance. It projects regional leverage through geography, through missile capability, through strategic partnerships, through asymmetric doctrine. This difference creates a unique dynamic. The United States thinks in terms of global balance. Iran thinks in terms of regional survival and influence. That difference in perspective often causes misunderstanding. The geography factor. Geography shapes strategy more than speeches do. Iran sits at a strategic crossroads. To its north, the Caucasus and Central Asia. To its west, Iraq and access toward the Mediterranean. To its east, Afghanistan and South Asia. To its south, the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. That southern corridor is critical. Roughly a significant percentage of the world's oil passes through that narrow maritime route, which means any tension in that corridor becomes global in minutes. Oil markets react instantly. Shipping routes adjust. Insurance costs change. Stock exchanges fluctuate. Modern war is not isolated. It is economically contagious. The cyber shadow war. One dimension often underestimated is cyber warfare. In modern conflict, power grids can be disrupted remotely. Financial systems can be targeted digitally. Communication networks can be slowed or disabled. Cyber confrontation offers plausible deniability. It is difficult to prove, difficult to attribute, difficult to respond proportionally. And that makes it dangerous, because ambiguity creates room for escalation. If a power grid fails, was it an accident, a technical fault, or a deliberate attack? When trust is low, suspicion rises quickly, and suspicion drives reaction. The domestic political calculation. No leader operates without domestic constraints. In Washington, foreign policy decisions pass through layers: executive branch, Congress, defense establishment, public opinion. After 2 decades of Middle Eastern conflict, there is caution within American society about large-scale military engagement. In Tehran, leadership must balance economic pressure from sanctions, public expectation, national security posture, regional influence commitments. Both governments must calculate not only what is strategically wise, but what is politically survivable. This makes decision-making more complex. The alliance network. Alliances change everything. The United States maintains security partnerships across the Middle East, military bases, joint exercises, defense agreements. Iran, meanwhile, maintains influence through regional networks, political partnerships, strategic relationships, ideological alignment with certain groups. In escalation scenarios, these networks activate, which means a bilateral confrontation can rapidly become regional, and regional conflict can trigger global diplomatic crisis. The energy shock domino effect. Let us analyze calmly, step by step, what happens if energy routes are disrupted. Day 1 to 3. Oil prices spike immediately. Energy traders react. Stock markets fluctuate. Week 1. Transportation costs increase. Airlines adjust ticket pricing. Shipping companies add risk premiums. Week 2 to 4. Fuel prices affect food transport. Inflation pressure increases globally. Governments release strategic reserves. Month 2. Economic growth forecasts are revised downward. Central banks adjust policy discussions. Public anxiety rises. This is why energy stability is central to global diplomacy. War is no longer local. It is macroeconomic. The deterrence balance. Both sides understand escalation carries enormous cost. This is why deterrence messaging becomes intense. Military drills are publicized, missile systems are displayed, defense alliances reaffirm commitments. The goal is simple: signal strength to prevent confrontation. But deterrence must be credible without being reckless. Too weak and it invites challenge. Too aggressive and it invites escalation. That line is razor thin. The role of global powers. Other major powers observe closely. China evaluates energy security and global trade implications. Russia calculates regional leverage. European states push for diplomatic de-escalation to prevent economic shock. The United Nations monitors the situation carefully. In modern geopolitics, no crisis exists in isolation. Every escalation shifts global alignment patterns. The information storm. In the digital era, conflict unfolds in real time. Videos spread instantly. Rumors circulate rapidly. Unverified claims trend globally. Markets respond not only to facts, but to perception of facts, which means managing narrative becomes part of strategy. Carefully worded statements, clarifications, denials, reassurances. Information is now part of the battlefield. The most important question.
The real question is not, who is stronger? The real question is, who is willing to risk more? Because in brinksmanship, risk tolerance determines direction. If both sides seek to avoid full-scale confrontation, diplomacy finds space. If pride overrides restraint, escalation accelerates. History shows both outcomes are possible. The possible pathways forward. There are realistically 3 broad paths. Controlled tension. Rhetoric continues. Limited incidents occur. Diplomacy quietly stabilizes the situation. Limited escalation. Targeted actions. Regional disruption. Short-term instability followed by negotiation. Broad confrontation. Direct military exchange. Regional spillover. Global economic impact. Most historical cases fall into the first 2 categories. Full-scale war between major powers is rare because cost is extreme. The human dimension. Behind analysis and maps are people. Civilians, families, workers, students. Economic instability affects ordinary citizens first. Fuel prices, food costs, job security. Modern geopolitical tension is felt in supermarkets and gas stations as much as in foreign ministries. This human dimension often drives pressure for de-escalation. The strategic reality. The strategic reality is this. Neither side benefits from prolonged war. The economic cost would be severe, the geopolitical consequences unpredictable, the domestic political impact significant. That is why brinksmanship often stops just short of disaster. But history warns us, even when leaders do not want war, war can emerge from miscalculation, which means communication is essential. Where this story stands now. At this moment, the situation represents tension, not total war, escalation risk, not inevitability. The coming weeks will depend on diplomatic backchannels, strategic restraint, clear signaling, international mediation. The world is watching closely, because in a globalized system, regional instability becomes global concern.